I'm Chris Morris. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Cockpit. We provide a software to private banks, family offices, multifamily offices to capture a high net worth, ultra high net worth family's entire estate. We won the most innovative solution for the Asia Private Banker, which was in Hong Kong. And then we won a couple of awards at the Global Private Banker. I spent about a decade across Yahoo and Facebook. And that environment and that culture was honestly wonderful. The first major global tech layoffs took place. And I was impacted by that. The Singapore office had maybe 2,500, 3,000 people. At the August time, it was like more than cut in half. So I thought, okay, screw it. I got my severance package. Let's throw ourselves into this.
Being in business is like looking into the abyss. They say when you look into the abyss looks back into you.
Right.
And that's when you find out really what you're all about. There are no excuses, nowhere to hide.
I perform very well under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. We're very happy about where it currently stands, and that is built mainly on listening to the feedback of the people who use it. The next stage of where we want to go is just building our client base, spending more time with a lot of these very sophisticated families, seeing, like personally, the value that I get is seeing the impact and net benefit that it has on how they use it and how it helps them with their wealth.
Chris, welcome.
Pleasure.
Mate, I'm so happy you're here.
Same, I'm super excited. Also, very honored to be here. You have some very established and high caliber individuals. So I feel I feel blessed to be part of your collection of episodes.
Well, now we have another highly prestigious guest. So thank you.
Thank you.
So what I want to do is just get you to give a quick intro as to who you are,
right.
And then what I want to do is share your wonderful story and unpack it so everyone can learn about how you've gone from the corporate world to entrepreneurialism. So please give a quick intro.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Chris Morris. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Cockpit. The long and short of what we do is we provide a software to private banks, family offices, multifamily offices to capture a high net worth, ultra high net worth family's entire estate. There's a lot of people within that industry in terms of software providers that focus very much on the kind of portfolio side of things. But the reality is with the kind of highest segment of these families, the portfolios are a very small portion of their total net worth.
Yeah.
And it's very kind of unaddressed in that respect. So we built that to essentially capture that entire ecosystem, allow you to make more money because if you know what's going on, that allows you to make better decisions. And in terms of my background and where I come from, I'm not ironically in the private banking or wealth management space. I come from more of a tech side of things. I spent about a decade across Yahoo and Facebook on the kind of building products for kind of the B2C route, so to speak. But my dipping my toes in the water into what we do now is because I met Dominic, who you know very well, who is the former CEO of Bank Pictet here in Singapore, who really identified the pain point when he was there that the tools to represent these ultra high net worth clients simply don't exist.
Yeah.
So there's me, tech side, him, the suited and booted private banking side, and it was kind of a match made in heaven, so to speak. So it worked out really well, and we've been doing that for about, 3.5 years now.
It's beautiful. What a great story. And thank you, because you guys recently invited me to an award ceremony, and you won a couple of awards. Do you just want to share what those were?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are two kind of editorial what would you call them? Establishments. There's the Global Private Banker and there's the Asian Private Banker. So we won the most innovative solution for the Global Private Asia Private Banker, which was in Hong Kong. And then we won a couple of awards at the Global Private Banker, which we had the privilege of having you at our table at. So it's phenomenal to be able to be recognized for the work that we do in that space. And I think, and I don't say this in an arrogant way in any way, shape, or form, but if you look at the I guess competition or the peers within that space, these are very entrenched companies. They've been around for more than 10 years. They have more than 500 employees. They're really kind of behemoths in their own right, and they play a fundamental part in the tools that these institutions use.
Yeah.
For us, there's myself, there's Dominic, and then we have our fantastic engineering team that's based out of Hyderabad in India. But I think the point that I'm trying to get to is, especially now with technology, we're starting to see that you don't need to raise a bunch of money and hire a bunch of expensive people, and kind of that's your stamp of approval, and that's how that you win business and you grow things. It's more about operating really efficiently, operating lean, keeping your overheads really, really low, and being able to kind of more quickly, I would say, improve or kind of refine your product based on the feedback that your customers get, as opposed to the big cruise ships that if you want to turn around the other way, it's going to take you ages.
It's like moving an oil tanker with a feather,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
One of the wonderful things that because we had a great time that night, and thanks so much for having me there.
Yeah, of course.
But what I realized with you is that your story actually it's a broad one, because you're a New Zealander, you're a Kiwi.
Yes.
But you cut your teeth in the UK. So tell us about where you grew up and then how you ended up in Bournemouth and.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So I was born in New Zealand. I didn't spend any time there. I think it was maybe less than a month. I then moved to Sweden with my mom and my dad. And then I bounced around a lot: Australia, Kuala Lumpur. Spent the majority of my life in Switzerland, in Zurich.
What did your parents do?
So my dad worked for ABB, which is I guess one of the world's largest industrial automation companies. Think renewable energy or robotics and things like that. So he spent his entire career there, but he had the opportunity to have these fantastic positions all around the world, and my brother and I got to travel and see all these different countries and go to all these different schools. But
Switzerland is where you spend a lot of time.
Switzerland is where I spent probably about 10 years of my life.
Well, think about that. Now you're in private banking.
I know, it's like a full circle event.
100%.
And the irony was, I never wanted to go into that space because everyone around you was kind of in it, and I was like, oh, this is boring, and I don't want to touch this space, and I want to be a bit of a rebel and maybe do some more artistic route. And then as luck would have it, I'm back kind of where it all began.
But from a different angle, from a creative route.
Sure.
And then what happened? And then how did you get to study in the UK? What was the story there?
So when I finished high school, it was either a choice between, I guess, the US or going to the UK, but because I got a British passport, it made more sense to go to the US. Plus, my mom's side being British, there was some family that were kind of there as well. So I decided to kind of take a more creative route. I did not do well in school at all.
Why?
Which I kind of feel a bit bad for, because I was fortunate enough to go to one of those fancy international schools in Switzerland that cost my parents a fortune. But the academic side of things, I personally didn't really resonate with me. I don't know why I didn't particularly fit into that.
School's not for everyone, right? I struggled at school. It was it's tough.
Yeah. I remember you and I were talking about that, and especially maybe it's a personal thing, but being told what to do and how to do it.
There's a reason why we're both in business for ourselves.
Exactly. So I think from a personality point of view and an interest point of view, I really gravitated to kind of building things, especially when it came to technology and when it came to the kind of creative side. I much preferred doing that. And I found, I guess the natural skip step was to kind of go pursue that in a creative field. Why did I end up at the Arts University of Bournemouth? Because it was one of the first universities that probably accepted me in that area.
That's why.
And then I was like, you know what? I'll go for it. See where it goes. And then the change in journey from doing that space to then thinking after doing, because in the UK you have to do 4 years. The first year is like I think they call it a foundation year.
Okay. In my time, we didn't have that because
you didn't have that?
No.
Yeah, I think that was a turning point, because it then opened my eyes to, okay, well, you're doing this creative stuff in the graphic design space, you're building things, you're kind of specializing in that field, but I wanted maybe a bit more of a business angle side of thing. So I was like, okay, fine, I'll take it a bit more seriously, and I'll go do a master's degree somewhere. So I ended up at King's College London,
It's a great university.
It is, and fantastic people, great curriculum. I kind of did international marketing in business there, and then one thing led to another, and it wasn't planned, but I ended up in the tech side of the world.
Yeah. And were you a techie before? Like, were you?
Yeah.
Oh, you did. So you enjoyed all of it.
I love like anything to do with computers and things like this.
Were you a gamer or?
Yes.
Big time.
100%.
What sort of games?
A lot of role-playing games, first-person shooter games.
See, when people
like
say that to me, I had a colleague that worked for me for years, and he said role-playing. I said, like, you're getting dressed up? What's going on?
Exactly.
Now,
exactly.
What is
sit
a
behind
role-play?
my desk dressed again.
But that's what I thought it was. You know, like, that's what...
I think what...
It's immersive.
It's immersive, right? So you create characters in these fictitious worlds. You are not being judged for whatever viewpoints or, whatever you do in the game. And you kind of have free range to build that world that you want, which ironically, looking back, is what we can do with our own lives. But I think when you are young and you're figuring yourself out and there's a lot of insecurities that are involved in that, it's kind of a safe space for you to explore yourself a little bit.
I never thought of it like that. I had too much fun in the real world.
Well,
things,
but given your background, you probably would have picked on me. And
no, I was not a bully. I bullied bullies.
Okay.
I didn't like bullies because that's the one thing in martial arts. You know, you learn. Actually, most people in martial arts are very humble because they get their arse.
Well, that's
handed to
true.
them.
Actually, that's true.
You know,
yeah.
And I love all. You know, I'm unusual. I did a lot of theatre. I tried a lot of things.
You did theatre?
Yeah,
I can actually see that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was a thespian. So like I tried. You know, the thing is, like, I think kids have to choose, and I don't think they should, because I think there's a great musician, an artist, an actor, a sports person in all of us at whatever level. But think about it, at some point, we all love drawing as kids, and at some point it stops. And maybe it starts again when you have kids again, you fall in love with things again. But I don't know why, we should be one thing. Like I was saying about Dominic Juris, he's a Renaissance man. He does so many different things. He's tried many different things.
Yeah.
And like, he plays it down. But I just think my favorite saying is, how I do anything is how I do everything.
100%.
So I want to try different things and fail and try again and try new things. And, So
but I think that, to your point, I think that video game world gives you that safe space to fail, so to speak. It may sound facetious, but it's actually, you can kind of, in a more safer space, explore yourself and what you like and what you don't like. And I think that's what gravitates a lot of people to it, especially at a younger age, right?
And so then what happened? Then what was the next part of your career then?
So after I said, my first proper job, I guess, was working at Yahoo in London.
Where was their office in London?
Shaftesbury Avenue.
Okay, nice.
And that was the first exposure to, let's say, a big organization. That was the Marissa Meyer days when she was the CEO of the company. And then through that process, I started to realize what I liked, what I didn't like.
And it is a process, right? You're discovering.
Yeah,
early.
I mean, a lot of it, in my opinion, is hot air. Especially the let's say the work that you do or the people that you interact with.
Yeah.
It's really just about playing a game in your own way of who to schmooze, who to get feedback from, how to get good performance reviews, all that kind of stuff. It's less about, this is my experience, but it was less about, let's say, the work that you do versus, who likes you at the end of the day from a more senior perspective.
Yeah.
So that was where I kind of, I guess, for lack of a better word, sharpened my teeth.
So what were you doing at Yahoo?
At Yahoo specifically, it was building out what they call their DSP, which is their demand side platform, which was a tool that allows publishers to advertise on Yahoo's kind of inventory of websites. So they had Yahoo Finance. They owned a couple of, I think, sports publications.
I had a guy on the show, you probably didn't see it, but called Kevin Ioli, who worked for Yahoo Sports forever, the number one guy in the US, and mainly did combat sports. And he was just awarded this week into the Boxing Hall of Fame.
Really?
I mean, he's huge, right? And he worked for them for years, and then he lost his job, unfortunately, and then he went solo. But no, because think about it, Yahoo back then, it was everything. It was everywhere.
It was huge.
Yeah.
It was it was super popular. I happened to be there at the time though, where they were doing that transition of being bought out by AOL,
Yeah.
and then they rebranded to Oath, and then because it was bought out by AOL, they didn't like the senior leadership of Yahoo, so they banded together and essentially axed anybody of seniority at Yahoo, and that it became a bit of a toxic environment and atmosphere.
Yeah.
But around that time, I was then approached by Facebook, who were building out their virtual reality team
Wow.
in London. And they were like, hey, you have that creative background from design, but you also have that experience in kind of building these products. It seems like a natural fit. Do you want to come do a set of interviews? And then
virtual reality was brand new to you at that stage.
Yeah, it was brand new. At that particular time, Facebook had acquired a company of which the name I now forget.
Okay.
But it was a tool that allowed anybody, similar, think of like Photoshop or Illustrator,
yeah,
to go onto and to build these augmented and virtual reality experiences. So a lot of the filters that you have on your, like if you go on Instagram, you see all the filters that go on your face. It was essentially a tool that has the infrastructure to be creative and building those capabilities and then publishing it into Facebook's ecosystem.
Very cool.
So it was about working with those engineers on kind of figuring out what makes sense, what we need to prioritize from a user perspective, what features that we need to build, which was really, honestly, it was fascinating at the time because it was
ahead of the curve, right?
It was, and the interesting thing was it was a startup-like environment, but you had Uncle Zuck's deep pockets to go and fail and do a bunch of stuff because they were plugging in so much money into building out that infrastructure so they could be competitive. So I think Snapchat was they had their own creative tool, and then later on down the line, TikTok made their own one as well. But Facebook was one of the first ones to kind of spearhead that development.
What was the cultural difference in terms of working for the two different firms?
Yahoo had, at the end of its time, a lot of dickheads. There's no other way I can put it. It was just not very good people. Moving to Facebook, it was the first corporate environment where you could really see why it was so hard to get into, because they were very, very, very selective about who they picked.
Yeah.
For example, the engineers that I would work with on a daily basis, bearing in mind I joined that not very senior, were, that guy worked formerly for NASA on building some kind of technology. I mean, it's like the absolute creme de la creme of individuals.
Did you find that you were having to be on the top of your game every single day when you turned up with those guys?
Yeah, of course. But then at the end of the day, you can't bullshit your way through pretending like you know what you're talking about. So as long as you come at it with that humble mindset of, hey, look, I don't know this, but I want to learn. Can you sit down with me and give you some of your time and help me navigate this? What I found was those people were incredibly receptive to that and very supportive of that. And that environment and that culture was honestly wonderful. To this day, one of the best gigs I ever had.
Were they engineers at NASA, some of these guys?
Some of the guys were like, what I remember one of the guys was, but then more broadly, you just had very, very, very sharp and capable individuals who were super switched on, super intellectual, but good with people as well.
Yeah.
And it was just a very nurturing and supportive environment of just working. And I think part of that is also how, by working at Facebook and the budget that they had, would enable them to kind of pay people accordingly. What do I mean by that? I worked for companies before where they expect a lot out of people and they pay them kind of poorly.
Yeah.
And, if you're showing up to work every day, you're not bringing your best self because you're worrying about this and worrying about that, and you're kind of bitter about this and bitter about that. And I know that Facebook was in a position to, one of the very few to be able to have the budget to do that. But I mean, they took care of everything, especially in the early days. I mean, like they pay you handsomely. Try go anywhere else, that's not going to happen in the tech space. The benefits, the business class travel, the 5-star hotels. I mean, it's not something that, and they take care of your family in terms of the health insurance and this and that. They created a very curated environment so that your day-to-day essentials you're not thinking about, so you can show up to work.
Yeah, and
You
perform.
can be sharp between the ears, and you can just get on with your work. And that was like, okay, this is really awesome. This is
So
really
powerful.
fantastic. But then obviously, as the company grows and it becomes more mature,
Yeah,
they start to
changes.
slowly creep back some of those
It's going to
things.
happen with size,
It's
right?
going to happen. Yeah.
I heard an interview with Dana White the other day about Mark Zuckerberg, and he said perhaps of all the people he's ever met, he's the biggest killer. And he meant it as a compliment. He goes, "That guy gets things done. He's fearless."
Yeah, he's a savage in his own right, and I don't use that term in a corny sense.
Yeah.
He's very decisive and quick to pull the plug as well. For example, the team that I first worked on in the virtual reality space, that team doesn't exist anymore, and the product doesn't exist anymore. It's like, hey, we put too much money into this. Done. Let's move on. Let's pivot. Let's put it into AI infrastructure.
But there's a lesson to be learned there. Sometimes you just need to know it's not working. We move on.
Yeah, and as my business partner Dominic says, you can't at sometimes keep putting, good money after bad money. You have to, make a decision sometimes. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that. What was your transition? How did you go from the corporate world to becoming a businessman?
Sure. So I worked, like I said, working at Facebook. I spent 5 years there in London. And then I always wanted to move to Singapore at some point, mainly because my folks are back in New Zealand and I didn't want to do the 30-hour pilgrimage from London.
It's crazy.
And around that time, London was kind of taking a little bit of a nosedive in terms of living there, and the enjoyability there was kind of creeping off. This was after COVID. So I had the opportunity to move here to Facebook, to Singapore, to join their machine learning team, specifically in detecting bad actors from coming into the ecosystem and, I don't know, trying to scam your grandmother of crypto ads and all these kind of things. Essentially, what parameters can we put in place such that individuals can't create en masse a bunch of bot accounts or kind of spamming accounts? And it's about identifying what those user behaviors are, building models around them, so it creates essentially a safer ecosystem and environment. So I had the opportunity to work on that because I wanted to build out the team here in Singapore. However, unfortunately, after being 8 months into that role, that was around August 22, was when, if you remember, the first major global tech layoffs took place. And I was impacted by that and part of that in Singapore because they wanted to essentially bring everything back to the US.
What year was
So
this?
I think it was 2022. So any satellite office, i.e. not in the US, was pretty much slaughtered. Like I think the Singapore office had maybe 2,500, 3,000 people.
Wow.
And I think that at the August time, it was like more than cut in half. So a lot of people impacted in that area. But fortunately, I was already in the process of working on WM Cockpit with Dominic at the time. So I thought, okay, screw it. I got my severance package. Let's throw ourselves into this.
Well, how did you guys meet? What's the story?
My missus and his missus were at a birthday party in Singapore, and they were chatting, and they were like, "Oh, our husbands should meet." My husband's just left Pictet, and Jess is like, "Oh, actually, yeah." And then my wife Jess was like, oh, "Okay, well, Chris is in tech," and then we got to talking, and as you know, Dominic, very charming and convincing individual.
100%.
He was like, "Hey, I'm working on this idea. I'm conceptualizing this idea. My observations at Pictet and the general private banking space is that the infrastructure and tools to really nurture and represent ultra high net worth individuals, they don't exist. You know how to build tech. I have my Rolodex and I know the ins and outs of this space. Why don't we team up and why don't we give it a shot and build something really interesting?" So that was kind of the genesis of that. And we were already working on that by the time that I left Facebook.
Had you thought about going into business for yourself before that?
Yeah.
But the reason why I ask is because a lot of people that I speak to that are thinking about being an entrepreneur or not, and should you do it, I always think it starts with, well, what do you want?
It should start with what that you want. I personally wouldn't advise it to anybody It's definitely not meant for everybody.
That's for sure.
But I think that so personally, my whole life, doesn't matter where I've worked or what spaces I've been in, I've always thought like, I don't know, I don't want to be doing it. Like I want to do something myself. It was always a niggling feeling in the back of my mind. And my wife especially was always an advocate, even when I was at Facebook, for like, hey, you need to think about.
How did you guys meet? She's from Uganda?
Do your own thing. She was born in Uganda.
Okay.
She moved to the UK when she was about 6 years old.
Okay.
And then she grew up in London.
Oh, so you met there?
I met in London. Yeah, we met
wow.
about 8 years ago. But she was always an advocate for, hey, look, think about what you want to do next. And I think what would be better suited for you is kind of going off and doing your own thing.
So that's a conversation you had at home?
Many times. She was a huge advocate for that for quite a long period of time.
But why I touch upon that is that if your spouse is not an advocate, doesn't champion you, doesn't believe in you, you got a problem. Because I know a lot of people haven't had that. My wife believes in me. I never asked her about going into business ever.
Yeah.
When I first did it 20 years ago, and all the different things I wanted to do, because I just felt that I'm going to do what I want to do. I have to do it for me.
Yeah.
But also because, my mum and my wife, they were the biggest influences in my life, but they're very conservative. And they would probably say, what about this? What about that? And I feel that you have to have your own conviction, but it does help if you have an unsupportive spouse. Forget about it. I think it's going to be really difficult.
I agree. And at the end of the day, it's often your significant other that sees the better in you than you do yourself. And I think she always saw that in me. So she's like, come on, just man up and go do something yourself.
Good for her.
So yeah, that was an interesting journey. But to your question and to your point, it was always at the back of my mind about wanting to do something.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, when I was at Facebook, for example, I got incredibly good at playing the game. And that's not to say that the work that I did was poor.
Yeah.
It's just that, well, to get good performance reviews and to get those bonuses, I know exactly what I need to say. I know exactly who I need to speak to. I know exactly who I need to get my peer review from. I know exactly who I need. And then it just became less about the work and more about optically, like, how do I make myself...
Isn't that interesting? That happens in large corporates.
It does, and it's incentivizing the wrong things, because then you're not doing maybe the work. You're not taking the risks that lead to good innovation. You're focusing more on, well, how can I benefit myself and play it for the long game?
Yeah.
But you then get dropped into doing your own thing. It's like, good luck, Oh, you really want to see how good you are, or you really think you're that good? Well, there's no playing that game.
There's nowhere to
it's
hide.
Like, okay, what's the output of what you're doing? And that will be the result of what you put into it. So, and that's a very humbling experience.
I think when you go into business for yourself, you very quickly find out what your metal is.
100%.
Right? And then talk to me about that journey. So what was the first year like?
I mean, like anything, you go through the honeymoon period first. It's very exciting. You have this great idea. You want to build it out. You build it out. And then that slowly starts to fizzle away because you come to the realizations about certain things. Maybe people are not as receptive to the product that you built as you wanted them to be. Maybe it's not coming together the way that you envisioned and you thought it would. Maybe people aren't signing up or signing, in our case, it's a B2B enterprise software. They're not signing up or using it as quickly as you would like them to. And that is a very humbling and kind of eye-opening experience.
Yeah.
And I think it's that then at that point, you start to have to get realistic about what your expectations are and how long it's going to take. I can't remember who said it, but they said something along the lines of, the quicker you accept that it's going to take longer to get to where you want it to get to, the quicker it will happen.
Yeah.
So if you can almost delay that gratification of whatever it is that you're looking for, and you stop chasing maybe the wrong things, and you focus on what it is that you're trying to build and reignite that passion, I think you can stick it out more for the long run. Because what I have seen in a lot of people, and this is why I say it's not meant for everyone, is I really don't think, if you have only worked in a corporate environment, you've never done anything maybe entrepreneurial, and you think about wanting to go and set up your own business and do your own thing, it sounds very sexy, it sounds very exciting, but you have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think it's more psychological of, I do not think that people realize the power and almost the heroine of having a consistent and reliable paycheck and having that stability, and not understanding psychologically what that does to you when you're only used to that space.
Yeah.
And then you have to understand that that's not the normal, and you have to get used to not having that sense of stability and security that I mean, fundamentally it's how we're built, it's primal.
Yep.
But you really have to have some conversations with yourself in terms of, what your expectations are, what your reality is.
Yeah.
And if you can get over and navigate that space, then I think you're in a good position. And then your perspective changes. Like, I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but the thought of going and working at a large corporation, I could not think of anything worse. I really couldn't.
It's interesting because so many people that I've worked with, even if they run smaller businesses as an employee, always say, look, when it's your own money, your own P&L, it's very different. And they'll say to me, no, I manage the company's money like it's my own. I said, no, you don't. Let me assure you, if right now there's 5 of us talking in a room, you're thinking, this has just cost me $10,000. You take the collective value of everyone's earnings. Why are we really chatting shit for an hour? We need to get this done and fast. You don't need to be here. Let's move.
Yeah.
Right. And then the thought process changes. But I always find that, being in business is like looking into the abyss. They say when you look into the abyss looks back into you.
Right.
And that's when you find out really what you're all about. And what's interesting is when you work for yourself, there are no excuses, nowhere to hide. And a lot of people think they give up. They think about giving up. And a lot of people I've spoken to think, I've never thought of giving up. And then people say, well, why and how? And, I think sometimes you have to ask yourself, is it in your DNA? What's your psychology? And I find it really fascinating. And then, in the world of private banking, if you look at the tycoons, the extremely wealthy people, those guys have got James Bond brass balls because they will double down, they will leverage, they'll borrow money. And I realized a long time ago, that's not me. I'm quite old fashioned. I don't like the idea of borrowing money. And then you have to ask yourself, do you want to have an investor? So, one of that's the really interesting thing I find when I speak to entrepreneurs or budding entrepreneurs, is about the whole psychology that goes behind it. So I'm just curious, like in terms of your self-development, what have you done, right? Because obviously with Dom, you've got someone who's been in business for a long time, but not as an entrepreneur. And credit to him because he had the courage to go into business, given that he had a long storied corporate career. And very few people go from being the CEO of a bank to setting up their own business. It's a lot of change.
I would challenge anyone to give me a name. It's very commendable, and it takes a lot of courage to do that, especially at that level.
Yeah.
But
think about it. It shouldn't be that difficult, because at that stage in your career, in your life, with that knowledge, you're well set to actually implement it.
That's true.
But you're right. It just doesn't happen very often.
It also depends on the industry, especially in the private banking industry. Especially in the private banking industry, it's
Yeah.
Especially in the private banking industry, it's a very slow-moving machine.
Yeah.
So with his experience, seeing inside what's the opportunities to improve it and where you can plug in, especially when it comes to technology, it's an ambitious vision. Along the way, it is baptism by fire in realizing what can actually be done and what can't be done.
So what was the process when you first sat down, without giving anything sensitive away, but how do you even unpack that? And do you take pen to paper and say, right, let's construct what we think the design would look like, the functionality? I'm just curious.
So the legend goes that when Dominic was back at Pictet, he had his very fancy Excel spreadsheet with all the formulas and macros, which was, we can call it the version 1 of WM Cockpit. And the idea was that, you know, he wanted to take that and then in-house be able to develop a piece of software that would best represent that and ultimately be good for the end client, right? But they didn't naturally, because of red tape and bureaucracy, didn't necessarily want to put money behind building that. So with that in mind, he had a conceptual idea about what would make sense on the software, what makes sense to represent, what people want to look at, what people want to see. And then once you have that framework in mind, from a technical side of things, you can just work from first principles and kind of build it out. The technical side of things, honestly, in this day and age, with all the tools and the infrastructure and the AI that we have, that's really not the difficult part.
Yeah.
It's more, okay, well, you can have a great product and it can have all the bells and whistles, but is somebody going to use it, and is somebody going to write you a check and put that in front of you and pay for it? And that's the discrepancy that I think, especially a lot of people going into doing their own thing, have a hard time kind of comprehending, because especially when you're building something and you put in your time and your energy and your money and the sacrifice that comes with it,
Yeah.
you know, you're passionate about what you built. You know, but Paul, check it out. There's this,
Yeah.
this, and it's this, and this, and this, and this, and this. It's like, yeah, okay, great, but like I don't have a use case for it, or it's too complicated. So it's really about not being too emotionally tied to it and understanding its practical implications, and are people actually going to use it and pay for it.
How long before you had your first proof of concept where you were ready to sit down and implement this and take it to client?
I think it probably took maybe 9 to 12 months to build out. And
That's
then,
what people don't realize.
And
you know?
then we had, I guess in technical terms, a MVP, a minimum viable product, to go and then showcase and demo people and sit with them. So we were at the Singapore Fintech Festival and, you know, learning the pros and cons of going to these kind of trade shows and showing people and sitting with people and understanding and getting their feedback and giving out free demos and servers and things like that. So that was I'd say maybe 9 to 12 months before we had like a viable product.
Now, when we were having dinner together, I asked you this question. I'm going to ask you again so you can answer this. I said, what's the biggest thing you've learned from going into business?
Sales. It's all about sales.
Yep.
At the end of the day, again, you can have the best possible product, but if nobody buys it or nobody is aware of it,
Yeah.
you know, it's not going to go anywhere. And especially coming from, I think, going back to your point about the transition from corporate to doing your own thing, coming from a more introverted background, prided myself on, you know, building things and being behind the computer and, you know, look at what I've done and all that. But when you're doing your own thing, and the reality is, if you can't sell it and you can't confidently talk about it and sit in front of people and convince them to use it,
Yeah.
it's not going to go anywhere. And especially along that journey, my wife really kind of plugged in and kept doubling down on, you know, you need to get out more and you need to go talk to more people and you
Really?
need to go sell this stuff. And, you know, you are good with people. You're just in your own head. And then you slowly start to realize and accept that as a reality.
So how did you take that first step to getting out there and speaking with people? Because, so we talked about this. So I always say that for me, an introvert is someone who, even if they love spending time with people, it tends to naturally drain their energy.
Yeah.
And I'm naturally an introvert. No one believes in. I say, no, it's my job is to be extroverted in those moments. But when I coach people, I say, you know, at best, maybe you over a period of time, you expose a different part of your soul. But the truth is, you can't really change who you are. So you've got to embrace and learn how to be extroverted in those moments. But you've also got to learn how to manage your energy, how to, you know, because I don't really enjoy broad general networking, you know.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
So it's a lot of work.
It's exhausting. But if we unpack that a little bit, so my, I guess, character development journey started from super introverted to being a lot more comfortable in the extroverted environment. I'm not an extrovert by any means. I think the terminology is an ambivert or somewhere in between. But I think it's like exposure therapy. The more you do it, the less you become, whether it's anxious and a lot of the time, it's the reason why, personally, I found I sat more in the introverted camp is because you're so caught up in your own head about what people are thinking about you and da-da-da. And then you slowly start to realize that nobody actually gives a shit about you. 100%. Everyone's in their own head thinking about their own problems, what they look like, I don't know, disagreement they had at work or at home, or it's really not that deep. And once you accept that and you internalize that and you realize, who you are and what you value and the skill set that you bring out, it then starts to become natural. And then to your point, you become less drained at the end of the day when you go home and you're knackered because you've had to speak to a bunch of people. And you come away from it like, okay, well, I learned this. I met this person that provided me some breadcrumbs to go explore this area. And then once you start to realize that and really lean into that, then it actually kind of becomes a lot more enjoyable.
I had a colleague of mine, and I said there was a thing that we used to do in theatre where you have to stand on a chair or a table, and the whole exercise is just to change your perspective. So when you're looking down at the room, you realize actually everyone's a little bit smaller there. So in other words, don't worry too much about yourself. And she was terrified because we were in the canteen. She said, I can't get up on that chair. I said, you have to get on that chair. You're getting on that chair. It's non-negotiable. And I said, and I got on the chair first, and everyone's looking. I said, why are you worried about these people? You don't even know anyone here. And then tomorrow, you're not even going to recognize any of these faces. So I said, come up, and I held her hand, and she got up. I said, it's not that bad, is it? So I said, so the thing is, in business and in sales, people flinch at the concept of people saying no. But the reality, if someone doesn't reply to an email or doesn't pick up the phone, is it really a no? And how often are people blatantly rude? They're not. There are some rude people out there, but I just find that if through kindness and becoming thick-skinned, you will accomplish a lot more. But sales is something, because I meet salespeople all the time, supposed salespeople, and I always say to, you need to read books on sales, understand psychology, but it's all about human connection, ultimately.
100%. I think to challenge that a little bit, I think there's only so much you read. Like, you can read to the wazoo, right? But you just got to get outside the house.
That's
right?
it.
And you just got to...
Good challenges to speak to people.
You got to just talk to people, right? What's that saying? A closed mouth never eats, right? Like, you just got to go out and you got to just hit your head against the wall and embarrass yourself and fail a lot. And then through that experience, you'll learn. The biggest influence for me when it came to sales was one of our shareholders is Ned Phillips, who I'm sure you're aware of. He has been instrumental in advising us from the sales perspective, because he came from the fintech background, having his own company in that space in Singapore, and he did that for 8 years, right? They raised a lot of capital, they had huge clients, and he's been tremendous in both from like a coaching, mentoring point of view. But his principle to people are afraid of somebody saying no, right? Like, unless somebody actually says no or piss off and I don't want to talk, it's not a no, right? And it's just about, being visible, being exposed, just keep at it, because there's so much noise, notification. I get so many emails a day from this and that and that and that. But the people that I typically respond to are the ones who kind of rise to the top of the inbox and, I forgot I need to get back to that person. And they probably, I don't know, maybe they sat there and deliberated, oh my goodness, should I send this other email? Am I doing too much or whatever? I'm not thinking that. It's just, I forgot to get around to that. So you just got to crack on. You got to be persistent with it. You got to be relentless with it. And I think if you really take it to heart and that really discourages you, then once again, don't do your own thing. Don't do your own thing. And doing your own thing, I'm jumping around a little bit, but I think it also ties to what stage of life you are as well.
Very true.
Because I don't have kids. I just recently got married. I'm in a position. Thank you so much. I'm in a position to take more risk.
Yeah.
If you've got kids in school and things like this, it's you have bills to pay, and you don't have maybe the opportunity to lean into maybe what you wanted to. So it's also about the stages.
I always feel you have to. Well, this is for people in general. Doesn't matter if you're on a job or you're running your own business. You've got to back yourself. You've got to believe in yourself. You've got to just keep trying. And you talked about embarrassment. I think it's the least explored emotion, right? Because
I think so.
Because if you embrace that and you can't really get embarrassed too much, then guess what? Everything seems a lot easier. And then you can have fun with it. And if you laugh at yourself, so for example, that night I brought my photographer with me.
Yeah, I remember.
And someone said, "You got a photographer?" I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, I've never been to these things. It's a new thing,
Yeah.
So Gautam is far more than a photographer, by the way. He's a videographer. He does a lot of editing." And I said, and I only told him, the day of? Was it the day of or the day before? I said, "Roll with me." Right? And then they wouldn't apparently let him in to the dining room area. And I said, "Yeah, forget that. Just roll with me. Don't worry about it." And the great thing with him
if you go in there acting like you belong there, nobody's going to question anything, right?
Mate, was I shy that night?
No.
I didn't give a shit,
It's
right?
you.
It's just go all in. But what was funny was there were quite a few people that wanted to get a picture taken
Yeah.
with the actual photographers. And then I said, "Oh, wait," I said, "GK, come over here."
Yeah.
So they thought I knew, and I said, "No, he's with me."
Yeah.
And I just found that hilarious.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
just got to have fun, man.
Yeah, you have to enjoy it. And again, maybe I don't take it as seriously as I should, but it's not that deep, Like,
So listen,
just go.
I've got some nice questions I pulled together for you in terms of rapid fire.
Okay.
Now, I don't normally read questions out, but I did have a few. So I was just thinking, like, now that you've been on this entrepreneurial journey, if you could have dinner with 3 entrepreneurs globally, who would you love to sit down with?
I think the obvious answer would be Musk would be one of them. I know a lot of people give him a lot of flack this day and age and hate on him, but at the end of the day,
He's a trillionaire.
If you look at his journey, especially if you read one of his earlier books, it's not a pleasant story.
Yeah.
Every single person, that's ridiculous. That's never going to happen. That's not going to work. Betting against him, shorting him in the market. Like, he's always proven everybody wrong across that journey. And I think that character is very admirable.
Of course.
And that grit is very admirable. So I'd love to sit down with him. Same thing with Bill Ackman.
Yep.
That dude lost billions of dollars, was going through a divorce, somehow managed to turn that around. And one of his teachings was, you just got to do a little bit every single day.
I love that.
And I think that's very important. And then the third is the more nerdy side of me, which is I'd love to sit down with Jensen from NVIDIA, not because of the AI and the chip stuff, but before that, when nobody cared about NVIDIA or spoke about NVIDIA, when it was about the gaming components and building the graphics cards and things like that, that was kind of my world and bread and butter. So I'd love to go back and chat about that space and talk about that. So that would be my 3.
So fascinating, these brilliant minds and what they do. What do you feel is the most underrated skill in leadership that you've observed?
Recognizing that no job is beneath you. I think you have to, the most effective people that I've seen, you just roll up your sleeves and you do the grunt work, you do what is not sexy or what you think I'm too good for. I think at the end of the day, those people have the biggest leverage, the biggest pull, and the biggest respect. And that's a very special skill.
You have to roll your sleeves up and get stuck in. So when Gautam was, I think, here maybe one of the first times on the podcast, there were people coming and going because we had various things happening that day, and the guest was about to arrive. I can't even remember who the guest was. And I was about to go into the toilet. He said, "Oh, someone's done a shit in the toilet." I said, "Well, okay." And he goes, "No, there's a mess."
Okay.
And I said, "Okay." And then I had a little look, and I just quickly cleaned it up. And I didn't call helper or whatever, or get some lackey to do it.
Yeah. And
I think he looked at me, and there was almost like respect. And I said, "Listen, when you own a company, you've got to get on your knees, put the plug in, roll your sleeves up and get stuck in. And I reminded, I said, I was a toilet cleaner. So the reality is, once a toilet cleaner, always a toilet cleaner, but remain humble, remember where you came from and put that work in.
100%. And to your point of all the people who, like, there's a lot of, I guess, fake wealth out there, so to speak, but the people who like really have it, they all come from those backgrounds, right?
Yeah.
And it's all in unsexy businesses, and it's from the ground up and very traumatic or very tumultuous environments, and no job is beneath them, and they have a lot of respect and a lot of reverence in that space. So I think that's probably the answer.
I love that. Most overrated startup metric.
Most overrated startup metric. ARR, which is the annual recurring revenue.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to valuations of businesses, a lot of it is tied to the ARR of the business.
Yeah.
And you can fluff a lot of those numbers, make them look fancy, but at the end of the day, like, what is the business actually making in terms of a profit, right? Which then ties into your point of, okay, but what are you trying to do with the business? Are you trying to scale it aggressively and raise more money and sell the business? Are you trying to turn it into a cash cow, which then I guess ARR would make sense because then that's all directly going to you. But I think it's overhyped a little bit
I love that.
when you focus on it too much.
I love that insight. What's the first thing that you're looking at when you're hiring or working with external vendors and outsourcing?
So my perspective has changed on that.
How
so
so?
I did a lot of interviewing at Facebook. Like over, I think 150 interviews, something like that over my period of time there. And when I started off, it was all about the pedigree and the stamp of approval of what university you went to. And then over time, and especially doing my own thing, I don't care where you've gone. I don't care what you've done. I haven't had a traditional background in that sense of doing the right things. I care about who you are. I care about that you have grit, motivation.
Love that.
You're willing to do a bunch of things. You'll do everything. You'll do anything. You'll figure out what you like, what you don't like. It's more about the person. And at the end of the day, especially now, I've said it before, but with the tools that are available, I don't care about the raw intellectual horsepower. I don't think that's necessarily the skill anymore. The skill is the people, right?
Yeah.
You can use that. You can train a monkey to use these tools.
Yeah.
But what you can't train is, are you going to get up in the morning? Are you going to be motivated? Are you going to try a bunch of different things? Are you going to, have the introspection to know what's working, what's not working, be thoughtful, think outside the box? I think that's what I look for. So it's more about the person.
I love that. I'm exactly the same. My biggest weakness is I love the underdog story.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I'm an underdog. And but you're right. When you meet people, you need to look deep into their soul. And like, is this guy going to graft or girl? Are they there and they're going to try, and are they resilient?
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. The people with those backgrounds, like, fantastic. And I think that they fit a specific space and will thrive very, very well.
Yes.
And that, again, depends on the environment of the company or the stage of the company, right? But trust me, if you have a small team, if you set up your own business and you started, taking somebody from like a blue chip company, they're going to suffer so badly because it's not structured. You're not getting the reliability, you're not getting handsomely paid, you're not getting these benefits, that benefits, which you become accustomed to. Yeah. And I've personally found I would rather have not experienced that at all than experience it and then you get it taken away, because that friction is very, very difficult for a lot of people.
There's a flip side to that challenge, because I've worked with a lot of younger people who were new entrants into the working world, and they're always yearning after the large corporate, the brand name, and it's that balancing act between the two. Outside of sales, what do you feel is the one quality that every entrepreneur really needs?
I don't know if this is the right thing to say, but I think your cheese needs to be slightly off your cracker. In the sense of, I think, again, it's a person, I think you got to be
So is your cheese? Where's your cheese?
I got a few screws loose. I think...
it takes one fisherman to see another one.
Exactly. I think the cold reality is, as much as there's a lot of stuff that I don't like about it, what I learned about myself is I perform very well under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. And that's probably not healthy, and it isn't healthy. But at the end of the day, I don't know if it's in my genetics. That's where I produce the most work. I show up for myself in the best way, shape, or form. When things get too comfortable and cozy, that's when I start to slide off the rails and go off the reservation. And I think that, again, that being nimble and again, I think you need to create your own structure, especially if you come from a structured environment. So when you go to work, you have a corporate, you got to get to work at a certain time, you got to show up, you got to look a certain way. When you do your own thing, nobody's telling you to do that, but you have to have the discipline to create that for yourself. So I think discipline is another huge part, which I think that's the first thing that you and I, when we first met and why we got on so well, was that connection. And I learned that a lot from my dad, who instilled that into my brother and I from a very young age. Like discipline, getting up, doing the things that you don't want to do as if you love doing them, doing hard things, doing the uncomfortable things. And that builds a kind of a longer term resilience for the stuff that is uncomfortable.
I love that. You can see it. And actually, you can see it in someone's track record as well, because it's funny when I look at a lot of people, like in recruitment, most people move every 2.5, 3 years. And, like I'll say to a CEO who has a internal strategic recruiter, so just out of curiosity, why did you appoint that person? Because they've changed job every 3 years. And why did they change job? Is it because they were about to crash and burn, and then they realize they get to change job again and change job again? And I always say, why don't you test them? And I just find it really fascinating because, it takes 10 years typically to get a black belt in any martial art. It takes time. And the one thing I love about, you see, my wife doesn't think I'm patient, because in reality, in many ways, I'm not. But today marks our 20th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations. That's really fantastic.
So I have been patient. I wouldn't say that, but she's the one that's patient. I've run my company for over 2 decades. So I always look at people's consistency. And of course, when you're younger in your journey, you're finding yourself, you're learning who you are, right? But I find it so interesting, people's stories. What's one common mistake that a lot of founders make?
I mean, I can't speak on behalf of other founders. But the mistakes that I have made is expecting things to move faster than the actual reality of how they move. And I think having very high expectations for how things are going to play out. Now, that's not to say be negative and don't be, you have to be slightly delusional. Otherwise, the reality will not be that pleasant. But I think it's about managing expectations. Some people think, I'm going to create this idea. Everyone's going to love it. Everyone's going to buy it. I'm going to raise a bunch of capital. I'm going to IPO my business, and then I'm going to sail off into the sunset. If you look under the hood of the reality of those metrics, that's not the case.
It's not the case. You know what I wish sometimes, like the sales cycle for me on the recruitment side, actually the whole process could be more than a year. So I worked on a C-level role for a year, right? Because they kept changing their mind. And then we found a candidate, and the candidate had a 6-month notice period.
Okay.
So that's 1.5 years. And then we have a 6-month guarantee that if the candidate leaves, we have to refund maybe 100% or a partial amount. So that means 6 months after they join, the money's not obligation free. So that's 2 years. And then sometimes banks will pay us 2, 3, 4, 5 months late. Now, the reality is that, okay, maybe the money wouldn't have been obligation free, but we have, cash flow issues. And then no one's in a rush to pay. And I just think to myself, mate, if you were on the other end of this, right, or if you made your mortgage payment late, you see what the bank would do.
But that's what I think, like I said, being in both positions, you really take that for granted. And when you're on the receiving end of that, the invoices, the late payments, the delayed payments, the constant chasing up, that's really difficult. It's really challenging, and it's very scary. At certain parts, it can be very scary.
It is. I mean, like I told you when I met you, there's a direct correlation with my hairstyle and being in business and in private banking. Talk about private banking. What's one thing that you feel that private banks can do to rethink and improve? Because it is a wonderful business, but it's. I'm just curious your take.
So I will approach this from the angle of where our kind of offering ties into it. If you look at the private banks, I would say 40 to 60% of the AUMs of these banks are held by a single digit percentage of their clients. Then, if you go another layer down and you look at all these reports by Cape Gemini and EY that say, well, when the next of kin inherit that money, more than 60, 70% of them leave the banking relationship they have and go somewhere else. And all of this is going to be happening in the next, 10 to 20 years. If that's not a wake-up call to understand, okay, what do we need to do to retain those individuals? I think that's going to be a real problem. And I think that the ones that will rise above everyone else will accept the fact that, hey, we need to move fast with certain technologies.
Yeah.
We need to understand that, a lot of the patriarchs, and I'm specifically talking about like the ultra high net worth segment, not retail. A lot of these patriarchs, while a lot of them are stuck in their ways and maybe they're not too excited about the technological piece, the next of kin who are kind of, my age or older are very much plugged into that space and have that expectation.
Yes.
They need to accept that. They need to lean into that. And even if it's just trying out different things, testing different products, not necessarily our own, then they're going to have to bite the bullet in some way, shape, or form.
It is so interesting. What task do you think that AI cannot capture and create and do well?
I don't think it will ever replace the human element. So you have two sides, right? You have the data side and you have the human side of things. Where AI is really fantastic, especially in the private banking space, is kind of synthesizing and collecting a family's estate or a bunch of assets, a bunch of people's information, where they live, their residences, their domicile, where they pay tax, how they hold assets, where those assets are held. That's a very complex matrix of data, and there's a lot that you can do with that. You obviously technically have to anonymize a lot of that stuff, but you can extract a lot of insights, right? You can get a lot of recommendations, okay? But then you have the human side of things as well, and that is on the experience side and maybe the morality and philosophical side. So let me give you an example. Let's say that the patriarch of that particular family built his wealth in a certain way and has some ideologies about what not to invest in.
Yeah.
He might want to impart that wisdom on who he's handing that money to, right?
Yeah.
Because if the next generation decides, oh, well, we had a massive liquidity event and we want to buy, I don't know, tobacco-related industries, well, dad or mom might have turned over in their grave if they knew that you were allocating money to that. So that and the experience of that, the morality, the psychology of it will not go away. AI, I think it's overhyped personally in terms of, taking over advisors' jobs. I don't think that's going to happen. People want to sit down with other people and have those relationships.
Yep.
I think it will be an expert as like a Robin to your Batman.
Yeah.
It will be a great sidekick. It will be a great complementary to what you do. As a byproduct, you'll be able to do more. You'll be able to have more discussions with more people, be more efficient. But at the end of the day, the interpersonal relationship stuff and the decisions that come from that will not go away.
I know you're going to say a balance of both, but from your perspective as a businessman, speed or perfection?
No, speed. Perfection doesn't exist.
So I was telling my media team, because I said, look, we can't work on everything indefinitely. We've got to get this out to market. At some point, we've got to realize that. And it's very difficult until people are in a commercial role do they understand that, right? Because the thing is, like, if you look at technology, what's new today is old tomorrow, right? Yeah. And efficiency is a big part of it.
I mean, like I said, when I worked at Facebook, it was a big organization, but it acted like a startup. The Kool-Aid, so to speak, of, let's just call it propaganda, that was plastered all over the walls. And one takeaway was move fast and break things.
I love that.
So, and I agree from that perspective. Like, you just got to do a bunch of stuff, see what sticks, iterate, because you can't spend time perfecting something, because like you said, in 3 months, there'll be a new mythos or fable XYZ model that will be better than the last, and it might be different, and it might process him. Who knows? So you have to be nimble, and you have to kind of iterate and fail quickly.
Tell me about what's next for WM Cockpit as you continue to do fantastic things.
So the goal and the objective is